Hello, friends. Welcome to My Good Woman, the podcast for new and future female leaders. I'm your host, Dawn Andrews, a happily married hockey mom and the founder and CEO of Free Range Thinking Business Strategy Consulting. Grab a seat at the table with me each week for candid conversations with culture-shifting, glass-ceiling-busting, trailblazing women leading impactful enterprises. We discuss what makes them tick, how they get it all done, and actionable strategies to help you lead with confidence and grow the visibility, reach, and revenue of your business. We're classy ladies, but we don't bleep the swear words. Listener discretion is advised. Ooh, friends, I am beyond excited to share this must-listen episode with you. Imagine excelling at your job, finding your voice, and asking for a promotion, only to be fired as you file for divorce. Most of us would settle into the couch with a pint of Ben & Jerry's and never get up again. Instead, my good woman, Rebekah Johnson, launched a business and became an industry pioneer. Rebekah is the founder and CEO of Numeracle, the telecom industry's leading expert in establishing enterprise identity using their proprietary entity identity management platform. With over 10 years of regulatory government and compliance experience, businesses have leaned on Rebekah's expertise to guide them through the ever-evolving complexities of maintaining a trusted identity in a changing telecom ecosystem. Rebekah is an active member of the FCC Hospital Robocall Protection Group and the chair of the Enterprise Communications Advocacy Coalition. Before founding Numeracle, Rebekah served on the FCC's robocall strike force, and we all know about those robocalls, y'all. And though these are impressive credentials, Rebekah and I had a super down-to-earth conversation. In this episode, we chatted about what happens when you find your voice, ask for what you want, and you don't get it. What it's like to launch a startup as a single mom, finding your courage and purpose through building a business, how to stay motivated when things get tough, and why workplace mental health is critical to employees. I found Rebekah and her story incredibly inspiring, and I know you will too. Enjoy my conversation with Rebekah Johnson. Rebekah Johnson, welcome to the My Good Woman podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here too.
I'm thankful to Melissa Widner for connecting us. I'm especially excited to talk to you today because, ooh, my listeners, there is a story. I'm a Marvel fan. I have 2 teenage boys, so we obviously enjoy Marvel movies. And I love a good origin story. So we're going to unpack your origin story today. The story that I'm most excited to hear from you is what happens when you stand up for yourself and it doesn't go the way that you thought it would.
Yeah, that's quite terrifying. First of all, it's going to tear you down and bring you to a place where you really, really, really reflect on who you are, what matters, and what's important in life. But to go back to that, as a woman, and I think it's unique to any minority group, when facing discrimination within your work environment, it's one of those things that it doesn't pop out and say, hey, you're being discriminated against. You checked off the 3 boxes. Therefore, go do this. You have to it's a gut thing. Like you have to look at the situation and the surrounding around you. For me, it was, hey, I'm bringing in a lot of money to the company and my counterparts are being paid on commission and I'm not getting anything. I was really getting tired of people saying, I owe you a drink. You know what? I'll take cash. It's like, I got a family to provide for. I don't need drinks and pats on backs. That just doesn't pay the bills.
So Rebekah, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I am the founder and CEO of a company called Numeracle. I would say I was a young girl growing up, wanted to be a lawyer. That's all I ever dreamed about.
Okay.
To be a lawyer, and went to college in the 90s, the late 90s, which, that was the tech boom for technology. And I fell in love with it right away. So when I graduated, I had multiple job offers. And as any good parents would do, they looked at my job offers and go, you're not going to law school. Pick one. I don't care. Pick one. Go to work and get out of the house. I started a path down technology. I was actually doing programming my junior year of college.
What introduced you to that, Rebekah? How did you find programming?
It's funny, but I grew up in a lab. My mom is a brilliant, or was, she's retired, worked as a GC mass spec technician. So she couldn't really afford daycare. I would come to the lab. She set me in front of a computer, and here I am surrounded by all these machines and equipment. And I started playing with paint and pixels. And I just started building things and interacting with the computers at an elementary age. So I
So
quickly fell in love with it.
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Often find that the seeds to our success are already planted in our childhood. We just have to take a minute to reflect and see, where did we have fun? Where was the joy? Where was the curiosity? I love that story that you
Just,
grew up
I
in
think
a room with machines.
That's it. And I think what was confusing too is it became second nature for me, which in today's era, we would say, yeah, computers are second nature for all children, but it wasn't whenever I was growing up. That's the 80s and the 90s. And so when I did get to college, I was like, computers are simple and easy. I thought I'm supposed to do something really challenging. And it was, challenging to learn new languages and data design, which was fun. But I thought that's not really the path I should be going down. I need to become a lawyer. That's challenging. I don't know anything about that. And it's actually wrong thinking. I think it took me a few decades to figure that one out. That's actually your power. If you are naturally good at something, then what you do is you take that core and then you find the challenges that surround it and build on those, which is CEO definitely was not necessarily on the list. That is a challenge role for me, but I'm a CEO of a tech company. So it makes sense. Like my brain just operates in technology. And I do have a love for law. So it's no surprise that I'm up here in DC now. I'm actually the chair of a lobbying group, a coalition representing businesses. So I do a lot of work at the Hill as well. So I've still been able to find and marry what my love and passion is about law, policies, regulations, and mirror it, but solving it with technology. And I just learned that's how my brain works. So dove into that.
The core of that I think is so valuable for anybody listening is taking that curiosity and the things that you're naturally good at, and then adding or finding your areas of growth or challenge and connected to that thing. But the heart of it is what you're really good at. So tell me a little bit about the CEO part for you. Did you envision starting a company, owning a company at some point, or when did that start to develop for you?
I didn't necessarily know that I would be in this role doing what I'm doing. But it is interesting when I reflect back on my entire career. Every job that I ever had always felt like it was a training grounds. It never felt like the place that I was going to be for any type of longevity. By having that mindset and realizing it, I then would look at, and I had a lot of bad jobs before I got into this
What are
role.
some of the bad jobs you had?
Just toxic environment.
So the environment or the actual what you were doing for the work?
The environment. The work was
Got it.
always enjoyable, absolutely enjoyable. And I made it so. That was kind of my point around when you find yourself in those toxic situations. It's a time to really reflect on who you are and how you handle it. Starting to like compartmentalize and going, is this an issue with me? Is this an issue with that person? Okay, it's not an issue with me. Then how do I protect myself with boundaries? How do I speak up? How to be respectful? If it is an issue with yourself, then okay, you got something that you need to learn and build. Maybe you don't work so well in a team environment and you need to make some changes. So I really just took each job and each one of those roles as an opportunity to reflect on myself, also taking note of how I was feeling, why I was feeling the way I was, to ensure that I absolutely don't do that to somebody else. And my employees would even tell you that. I'm like, my greatest fear is that someone in my company would feel bad about themselves at the end of the day, that they would sacrifice time with their family for a deadline that was just self-inflicted. Like seriously, most deadlines were self-inflicted. Unless you're in like healthcare and you're an ambulatory service that's picking up somebody, time is of the essence, and sorry, you're going to finish your snack later. We don't have to destroy people just for the bottom line there. I don't believe in that at all.
So it sounds like everything that you've picked up along the way, as most of us do, has informed what you've built now. What are some of the founding principles or values that Numeracle holds and passes through to its employees?
A lot of it's based on how I started it. And I know we're going to take time out for that. But one of the things I learned, because I was going through a lot of mental anguish, there's a lot going on in my life at the time. And mental health became very important to me. And I gave myself permission to relax, to step away from the computer, to go outside, take a walk, even though the anxiety of I've got to make money and I've got to make this successful and I have children to care for and provide for, like all of that is riding on me. But I knew I couldn't do it if my mind was not clear and my soul was not settled. So I learned to trust that, okay, I can take this time. I'm going to have a cup of coffee. I'm going to go for a walk. I lived on a dirt road. I was in the country, had chickens. It was a whole farm thing. And go out there, be with the animals. And then I'll start my day, I don't know, 10 a.m. if that's when I feel like starting my day. So mental health became very important. So I've brought that over into my company. And not enough companies, they'll talk about it, but they don't act on it. And it has to be deliberate. So that's one of the core foundations, especially for a startup, which is a high anxiety ridden environment. You just have to be aware of that. Everything else will take care of itself. It really will.
I think it's fascinating. And one thing that I'm curious about, especially when women are starting businesses, is how they find their niche and their white space and the problem that they want to tackle. So tell me about that part of founding Numeracle.
How Numeracle was founded has to require the part of the story of where I found myself on the FCC's robocall strike force. I actually interjected myself. This is where the law comes in, right? You had Federal Communications Commission, who has basically stood up and said, all right, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and all you carriers, we have a problem in the United States for consumers. Consumers are being frauded via the phone line. You're getting, there was like the cruise line calls, you have the car warranty calls, and they're basically telling the carriers, you got to solve this problem or we're going to come in and mandate. And that's just kind of how our government works, right? I thought, oh, wow, I was over compliance at the prior company, ensuring that our customers were in compliance with all the various different laws and regulations that we have via technology. That was how we solved for it. So I wanted to be a part of it. So I get on this strike force and I participate in it, and we define what the carriers are going to do. That's where the problem first introduced itself. I realized I was talking about some brilliant, great people, still friends with them today. There's a lot of lawyers who don't understand technology per se. And the things and the suggestions that these lawyers were making, I thought, oh my gosh, that's not going to work. It's actually going to be disastrous if you go forward with implementing what you think is going to be a good idea. And what they were implementing was algorithms, analysis on call traffic. And all your listeners absolutely have experienced this. It's where your phone rings up and it might say spam likely or potential fraud. That's a result of the work that we did within this group. Problem was, my clients, I had a lot of hospitals, I had your pharmacy stores, I had schools, and there was no way for the carriers to know, are you blocking a call that I went from my school? Are you blocking my doctor's office? So I raised a flag. I think this is a bad idea. Speaking up, I was like, Rebekah, we got to just do this report. We got to get it out there. So the first quarter back in 2017, when all of these efforts were rolled out, sure enough, everything I predicted came to light. So I did receive a call from one of the major wireless carriers out of DC. And it basically said, okay, so we've been talking. Your name keeps coming up.
Yeah.
We're going to take your stance. Oops. What do we do?
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. And I was still working. I still had.
So you were still employed by someone else at this point?
I was still employed by somebody else. And within a matter of about a month after that phone call is when I found myself unemployed. I knew there was a problem. I knew how to solve it and needed identity. And so whenever I received that call, it didn't matter if I was no longer at the prior employer. I found that these carriers, they wanted me. So I was like, okay, let's try to solve this together. So I spent my first year kind of data gathering. I got the FCC, the FTC, the CFPB was involved, all the major wireless carriers and enterprises, brought them into a room every quarter here in DC. And we had regulation come out of this, the know your customer concept. And my company basically emerged out of this. They became a great requirements gathering source. And we inject basically identity. So a hospital can come to us and say, hey, I'm St. Jude's or Johns Hopkins, and these are all of the phone numbers that we use, associate our identity to these numbers. That data gets fed into the carrier's algorithm so that they will not block the call or improperly label it. So that's just got a simple high level of what we do. And we've expanded since then, but it's all around identity and protecting the reputation of good callers.
So for those of you listening out there, every time a call comes up on your phone, if it's somebody that you already know, their face pops up, you've already included them in your address book so you know that it's your best friend that's calling, for instance. Or conversely, some carriers are pretty good about the spam piece of things and they'll say potential spam. But what happens when you're in that in-between place? And so what Rebekah's company does is provides those trustable, real, legitimate companies and resources and services with the opportunity to brand themselves so that when that call rings on your phone, it comes all the way through. Just to give a super simple personal example, Rebekah, my mother she's served by Kaiser, a healthcare company here in California and other places as well. But there was an appointment that they were trying to reach her for and she wasn't picking up the phone. So they called me as the backup number. And I got 3 different calls, all labeled as potential spam. And so I kept bumping the call because I'm like, I don't know you. I'm not going to pick up this call. And then finally, I listened back to the message that somebody had left saying, hey, we're trying to reach her mom for her appointment. And it shouldn't happen. And so I love that you have found the space and created the solution to be able to close that gap for all of us as users of these services.
And it's wild. And so Kaiser, I have talked with them. They really need to to get those services.
Kaiser.
It's a no-brainer. But what's interesting too is I was just following what I felt like. It was a calling for me. I really wasn't going to be able to sleep at night knowing that this problem existed and calls, especially like healthcare, might not be delivered. That was a burden on my shoulders that I needed to solve. I had to. It wasn't like I was looking to start a company. I definitely didn't go through this phase of, I want to be an entrepreneur. I just stumbled into it. And it was a matter of, are you going to respond to the call or not? I'm going to respond to the call. So I'm doing this. And since then, which is really weird, is it created an entire competitive market. So I'm flattered. Wow, I've got competitors. So that was some validation that maybe this is something to solve for. And even words that I have put out, because this was an undefined market, it was an undefined problem. It has its own terminology and words, and people don't even realize they're using words that I've put out there. I just made them up. And then all of a sudden, I was watching a video last night at a conference that was held somewhere in Europe. And there's a person like literally saying the words that I have used to frame this particular problem and solution. So it was pretty bizarre.
Incredible. It's incredible that you've defined a category and are continuing to build on it. And it continues to be a very deep and great need. Here's what I'm curious about. Because what I hear in your sharing is how driven by purpose you are. And you shared with me a little of the behind the scenes story, the origin story. And I would love for you, if you're willing to share that with the listeners. How did you come to be the person that has started this? We got the technical part of it, the space that you saw and where you were in time and space and who you were talking to that revealed this. But there were a lot of personal circumstances that were present that also launched this. And I think there's a great story there.
It's literally the worst time. If you were to look at my life on a piece of paper and I were to conduct a survey, not a single person would say, this is the right time to start a company. I think everybody would say, no.
Maybe pump the brakes a little bit.
So, boy, everybody kind of has that year. I've learned that at this age in life, everyone has like that year. There was just a year in your life where everything just seemed to fall off the rails. And that was the year I started the company. So it kicked off January 3rd of 2017. My ex-husband moved out, left, and I found myself responsible for a farm and chickens, a lot of land, and 2 elementary age children. And that's when I started to evaluate, okay, this was a dual income household. Really need more income to support my children. I wasn't getting child support. I was still paying the truck note, the cell phone bill. There's a lot of things that happen to women that you can't get yourself out on, financial obligations, credit cards, all that stuff. Because I didn't want my credit to go bad. Of course, I'm going to pay for everything and I will scrap every penny together and cover it. So that created a sense of desperation of where, okay, I think I need to address the problem that I've been having in work with regards to what I talked about earlier is I'm not really being compensated properly for the job that I'm doing. And it's not a complaint. It was just fact. I could look at the deals that I was helping close. I had another about $8 million in the pipeline to close on, and I'd proven myself successful in bringing them into the company. So I went and read, right? So this is where it comes into, let me read, what do women do in these situations? And they said, don't go into it going, my husband left me and I got 2 children and I need more money. That's not the right way to do it. And I would still say that's not the right way to do it. I really took an evaluation of what I was bringing to the company, the role that I was in, and what would be the proper place for me to be successful for the company and also successful for myself. So it has to be a win-win situation, not just a one-way street. That's not what jobs are here for, is to provide for your needs. It's both needs are getting met. So I mapped it out and I thought, this is great. Like it looked really good. I'm whiteboarding and I got a lot of head nods from my new boss at the time. And he came back with, it was a shot to the heart, but he came back and was like, oh, mind you, I've been a title of a manager for about 8 years. 8 years while I watched everybody else, mostly men, pass me on by, manager, director, VP. And I'm like, can I get a promotion with some kind of title change? So I wanted to get VP. I had this position all mapped out. Gentleman comes back to me. He's new to the company. And he goes, oh, we got this great job for you. He's like, I can't think of the name of it. He was like slipping his mind. He was telling me what the job was. And I kind of lost it a little bit. And I said, please, for the love of God, do not tell me that it is a senior compliance manager. He goes, yeah, that's it. I said, I've already done that role. He told me if I did this role, I could maybe see director level. I said, I've already done that role. Not only have I done that role, I wrote the job description for it. And the reason why you don't have any, like you have a gap, is because you didn't backfill all the work that I did. So you're literally asking me to go back and do another job. And the wind was knocked out of me that here I am and I did all this stuff. And now I'm being asked to go do a job that I had already done. And it was an issue because they failed to keep it going.
So you were in a place where it was time to ask for what you deserve. You prepared your conversation. You looked at what contributions you had been making to the company. You looked at your experience, expertise, relationships to share that with them. You basically designed and proposed the new role for them, painted the picture of why it was valuable, what benefit it would be to the company. And after whatever level of consideration, they came back and wanted to demote you to a role you had previously done.
Which he had no idea. He was like, oh, we really thought about what you can contribute to the company. I was like, if you did, you would have realized that I'd already done that.
Well, that'll piss a girl off.
Oh, yeah, I did. I distinctly remember. And I said, you know what? I'm sitting at the table. I was expecting to have a full course meal presented to me. And you brought me last year's frozen leftovers. I'm done for the day. I'm pouring a glass of whiskey and I'm going to think about this.
Bye. Yeah.
It was like, before I say anything else, I got to go. And so that's when I called my prior boss at the time. She was the one that was kind of helping me on this transition. I called her and she was just floored. She goes, I have never in my entire career ever seen anything like this. And so she's the one who actually said, let's just go full on with filing a formal complaint within the company. I filed the complaint. It was valid. It was legit. And I went to see my brand new boss, and he's the one who fired me 4 days later. 4 days later, he fired me. I'd also filed a complaint against him. He was in over his skis. Young something, very narcissistic, which I am an expert at identifying those now because I've had that experience for many years. And so I was like, shoot.
Yep. Darn it. There it is again.
For them, they're on their own. They'll burn their own house down. It hit me hard because I'd actually, within that week, I'd also filed my divorce papers. I was terrified of the repercussions of having that delivered, what that might mean to me, what that might mean to my kids. And I had put in actually a mental health break. I worded it, I need a mental health break because I'm about to just completely unravel. I didn't get the job offer that I wanted. I just filed divorce papers. I'm scared and I just need a break. That joker of a person fired me the first day of my mental health break because he didn't want to pay for it. So I remember crying, and that was Cinco de Mayo, May 5th of 2017. Yeah, I know. I definitely drink margaritas every Cinco de Mayo.
I was going to say, I'll see you on the 5th.
So I remember just crying, and I didn't know you could cry so hard that your tears will burn, but my tear ducts were completely raw. And it was about 2 a.m. in the morning, and my kids were actually with their dad. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, you know what? That's it. That's it. I am not going to cry about this. I'm not going to wallow in this. I'm going to solve this robocall problem. And I did interview for some jobs. And every time I thought about taking the job, I literally felt like I was abandoning a hurt person. Like you just don't leave like someone in need. And this was an industry in need. And so I used up every last penny that I had to my name, my entire life savings. I had no health insurance for the first year. And then I ended up selling a house and moving all within that year as well too, up to the DC area. And so that's when I said,
so stressful.
Mental health is important. That's why it is important. And if you take the time and give yourself the ability to breathe, reflect, really just connect with yourself during those times, you can make it through it. You don't have to be on 24/7. You don't, even in a startup. And I was like, one day I'm going to write a book and I would talk about how I did not work 12, 14 hours a day. I didn't.
No hustle and grind, which are not like the hustle and grind conversation around
Yeah.
startups drives me crazy.
You're not being efficient with your time. And as a mom, I still had to be there for my kids. I didn't want to sacrifice them and my time with them. I didn't want to have guilt. So it was just like, I'm just going to carve it out. And if it's meant to be, it'll be.
Well done. Ooh. Just know I'm talking to your 2017 self. I wanna go back there and hug the crap out of her and just say,
I do
"Girl,
too.
just hang in for the miracle. Hang in for the miracle. It's happening."
Yeah. I don't know
Woo.
if I could do that again. I'll tell you. I look at them like, woo, I think that there's just one of those in me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing what fury can generate. Like you were talking about being in survival mode. This makes me curious. So you were talking about mental health
Mhm.
and coming from this place where your mind is calm and your soul is clear in creating things.
Yep.
The creation of this company was coming out of some really difficult times. After the initiation of it, after the start of it, did you find that there are things that you wanted to go back, change, review, pivot on? Or did the fire of that moment burn everything clear and it's been a direct path from that point?
Yeah, there's nothing I would change when I look back. And it's kind of interesting because I've lived a life where we all have regrets. And I remember, like, as my marriage was coming to an end, and my dad going, there's no need to have regrets. It's life, it's a journey, there's a lesson, and if there's a lesson that you've learned, then that's a value to your future. So why would you regret a situation like that? Not having bitterness, resentment, I had to let that go. I've seen that destroy people when they get fired. Yes, I was wrongfully fired. I could have stood on that podium and screamed and yelled, and I would have gathered and amassed a whole lot of supporters. But where does that get me? It gets me absolutely nowhere. So I don't waste my
It basically
time.
pins you in that moment,
Right in
I
the front.
find,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yep.
no moving forward. You're just stuck, you're frozen in time there.
Yep. So it's just, if I had done that, then that definitely would have been a regret. But you just keep moving forward. You take the time to reflect. I went and traveled during that first summer when I was separated. I traveled to Canada. I traveled to Seattle. I traveled like all over the place. I went to Finland to stay on this island. It's called Super She. You can Google it. It's an amazing experience. And really learn to fall in love with myself, to respect myself, to support myself. And I gave myself the freedom to think. And that's when the ideas flow in. That's when you get clarity. If you're always in the grind, I don't know how it's possible. I
Yeah.
think you're just whack-a-moling and you have no idea really where you're going. So that's my recommendation. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying to discipline yourself, to give yourself that space.
Do you think that in the moment that you were preparing to ask for the raise, that you were preparing to ask for the promotion, do you think that some of that preparation was kernels or foundation that helped you launch afterwards? Like you're talking about getting to know yourself. I'm wondering whether that was a reckoning moment for you to realize your value, your expertise, to really put some quantity around it instead of just I deserve this. You actually made a case for yourself.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that. I'm also very faith based. For me, it's a higher power, it's a calling bigger than ourselves. My life is just a teeny little poof. Everything I came in with the world with is what I take out. So I'm not that person that's motivated by status or money. I didn't care about, I
Yeah.
really didn't care about any of that stuff. It's just what's your purpose and what is the legacy that you're going to leave behind is really what I want to focus more on. So having that kind of faith base, it allowed me to not have to carry this burden on my own. And I throw it to that higher power and say, okay, if this is my calling and if this is what we're doing in life, you're along with me, you've got to clear the pathway for me. And so my days, I executed the plan of the day and made a plan for tomorrow. And there were weeks that I would wake up Monday morning not knowing I was going to be in California on Thursday, literally.
Mhm.
But I went with the flow and allowed, and you can read this from, gosh, I can't remember the name of the book. It's an old one where it was some of our great founders of inventions. They did this same thing where they would plug into that higher power, God, whoever it is for you, and there would be this exchange. And I think it's just that getting completely centered and you silence out. It's that quiet room. It's that space. All humans, I think, are equipped to be able to connect in that way, but we leave ourselves so busy in the phones and all this stuff that we're not taking the time to listen. So there could be people who are walking, you're going, I'm not hearing from, I don't know what my direction and purpose is. How much time have you put into actually understanding it? And you have to just sit and be quiet. And that's hard to find that time, especially as a mom.
This is a turn that I didn't know we were going to go down, and I'm loving it. So tell me, how do you connect? Is there a process that you go through for yourself? Is there a ritual? How do you make that connection for yourself?
I think exercise was something that I discovered was like that reciprocal, you put into it and it gives right back to you. So getting physically healthy is definitely important. Walking, running, whatever you do to get out in nature. And I love nature. So you can go to the extremes of like me. I traveled to British Columbia, is one of my favorite places in the whole world, Squamish, and went hiking, solo hiking, just me and nature. And I'm not speaking or saying anything for like hours. That was something that was important to me. I make time for that. But in your everyday life, if your kids go to school, don't fill that whole time up with doing the laundry and the cleaning, and things can set. And if you can't stand the look of it and get relaxed, like I have to have a clean house, get outside and go for a walk. And don't bring your phone. Don't listen to anything. Just listen to the birds, listen to nature, like really take in the surrounding around you and just get into that zone. Yeah, that's where I get all my ideas. Or a hot shower. Take a long hot shower. I mean, seriously, it's just getting alone and nobody pulling on you or needing something from you.
This conversation could not have come at a better time, because I'm finding myself going into 2023, my natural inclination, I don't know if natural is quite the right word. My trained inclination is get the most out of the last bit of the year. Go. What else can I squeeze in before the 12/31 deadline? What can we do? What can we do? And then have a good sleep. And then wake up on January 2nd. Let's hit it. Let's hit it. What are we doing? What's the next thing? And it was clear to me in this particular year that I did not want to play the game that way for the tail end of the year and into the beginning of this year. But everything that you're sharing is resonating so deeply. And I hope that the listeners are also like that it's ringing your bell. I took a nice long walk through the woods with my sister-in-law over the Christmas break and with my niece. And as we were walking, like a little bit of conversation, a lot of looking around, but a lot of quiet too. And I was just appreciating and reconnecting to the idea that when you hike, especially if you can hike on a trail as opposed to a paved path, you get very present and mindful because all you're doing is paying attention to where your next foot goes. There could be things in the path that you need to be careful of, tree branches, whatever it is, like whatever you're surrounded by, it brings you into your body in a way that even taking a walk in your neighborhood or down a sidewalk can help, but it's not quite the same as walking out in nature. And I really appreciate that you've made that present and showed how that connection really helped you go from this horrible, challenging year with stacks on stacks of stressors like divorce, leaving a job, being a parent, other than a death in the family, like you hit all the top ones, major illness, like it's incredible. And I appreciate that you've made that part of yourself available to this conversation today to help people be present to that as they go through whatever challenges they're facing as they grow their businesses.
You know what's interesting as a side effect, I think it's worth saying is some people will be threatened by you doing that. Honestly, the way that I was able to prepare to speak up and stand up for myself in my marriage, it took about a year's worth of diving into myself before I got a voice. And that process became very threatening to others around me. You might get deemed selfish. You might get deemed conceited. And I was listening to like women powering music and I got mocked for that, right? So there's going to be a lot of people resistant to it. And that was my first lesson in sometimes we're a mirror to others. And I used to live my life trying to correct myself so that they could be happy. And I finally was like, it was an epiphany. I was like, they have a filter through which they see me, and that filter is owned and belongs to them. They design the filter. They get to adjust the filter. They decide if it's there or not. And I can't keep living my life changing everybody's filters to see me the way that I see myself. So I finally like broke free from that. It gave me so much power and strength. But during that process, like I've even lost friends, like lifelong, I thought were like really good friends. I lost friends through this process. So if you take on those first steps and take that transformation, it's more than just your internal that changes. You might find a lot of your external changes. And I'm the happiest I've ever been. Right now, I've got an incredible partner. I love our little blended family. We had one of the best Christmases ever. It was just a lot of all of us looking at each other going, we're so happy. This was awesome. This was a great time. So it takes time to get to that point, but don't be discouraged if others are threatened by your own journey.
That's so useful and such a great point to make. When we're going through changes, it is going to upset the outside world because we've trained people to see us a certain way and they need to see us a certain way because of their own agendas. If you think about it, this time of year, everybody's talking about losing weight, which drives me bananas. But if that's a goal of yours and you're taking that on, you want to become healthier, lose weight, change something about your physical appearance, obviously for yourself, you're changing something internally, the way you think about yourself, the way you think about food or exercise or whatever else is involved for you making that change. It is going to shift the people around you. They have a vested interest in keeping you the same way because it keeps their identities the same way. And everybody feels safe, comfortable with whatever that version of themselves is, even if they're not necessarily satisfied or happy or inspired. So I appreciate you sharing that story because I think it will give people, it gives me courage to take whatever next steps I'm excited to take. So I hope that it's leaving other people with that courage as well. I'm hearing the purpose and courage all over this conversation right now.
It's good 2023.
Hashtag Rebekah Johnson. So you shared with me a little bit about the support that you received and continue to receive during all of this transition. So tell me a little bit about your circle of friends.
Yeah, this is where I might get emotional. I love these ladies. So yeah, I lost basically most of my friends when I went through this transition to starting the company and then moving up to Northern Virginia area. And I was a little shy and nervous. I'm a Southerner. So being up in the North, and I know people go, Virginia's the South. It's the North if you lived on the coast. If you lived on the Gulf Coast, this is called the North. Tennessee is the North. So I was a little intimidated, like how was I going to connect with people? And I wanted my kids to have friends. So obviously the parents have to become friends too. And I was overwhelmed with how supportive, kind, loving, welcoming the ladies were in my daughter's class. It really started with my daughter and some of her friends. And we did this thing called Odyssey of the Mind. It was torture for a parent. It's a wonderful program. It's just part of the STEM program and kids get to go through this process, but it was a lot of dedication and involvement from the parents. And we all met from this experience. I think it was like, I don't know, second grade or third grade. And we instantly became good friends and they have been my rock and my core. And it's a group of ladies who we would have these conversations. Like they're encouragers. They accept our flaws. Nobody judges anybody within this group. And there's just this, and we're so diverse. This was crazy. Like we have different religious backgrounds, different ethnicities, different cultures. We're just this like gumbo pot of ladies. And the thing that we've all learned is, you know what? We all want to be loved. We want to be appreciated. We want to be respected. And we want to pour out our love. These are very loving ladies. And so whether we're busy, we're all very busy ladies, we could go months without seeing each other. But if anybody had a need, because I was a single mom up here and I had to travel. So there were times I was like, I got to leave on Thursday. Can my kids stay over? Absolutely. Boom. They would take the kids over. And we do that for each other. Boom, 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 boom. Who needs their kid taken somewhere? And I just couldn't do this without them. We had a little Christmas get together with our daughters because they're now in high school now. I was like, my cup is so full. This group of ladies right here, I don't need anymore. There's nothing lacking. And I really love these women and don't know how I would do this without them. And that's what we need. Women need that level of support.
I think we need it from the men in our lives, from regardless of identity. I think we need it from everyone, but I do think we especially need it from other women.
Yes.
There's just an unspoken, I understand, I've been there, I get it, I see the world in a similar way that you just can't get from people who are not. Yeah.
And being a mom and all the things that come with that and being a working mom, it feels like we're juggling balls, but I think we've concluded we weren't meant to go through this world by ourselves. We were meant to have that group, that community, and that's really important.
I love it. So where do you go? Are these the people that you turn to if you have challenges in your business from a technical, strategic, operational point of view? Is this the same group of people that you turn to when you have those kinds of challenges as well?
Yes, anything like employee related, my personal life. And what's great too is I don't want to dismiss the husbands. The husbands are phenomenal. They're great too. And one of them's already gone through like an exit process. So I definitely come to him and I'm like, I need help on understanding like financials or things like that. It's someone I can absolutely try. He has zero interest in the success of the company or not. So I can get a really good opinion and advice from them. And we flow. We'll flow in and out of politics, because we are in DC and some of these ladies are involved in that stuff. So we'll just flow. Then we'll talk about a cookie recipe that we had, and then back over into maybe financial models or whatever it may be. It's really nice to have that group. We're all over the place.
It sounds to me like you in developing those relationships over the years from your children when they were in second grade to now in high school, you guys have created a space for everybody to be fully themselves,
Yes,
to cover all of those topics in the course of being able to be together. All parts of yourself are welcome in that community, not just
absolutely.
one piece, one way, one something, which it sounds like prior to having your epiphany, there probably were sides of yourself that you found okay in certain situations, but you weren't able to fully be yourself. And now through this community and making the changes yourself, you're able to really fully express yourself.
When the mask can come off and you still feel loved and supported, then that's a good group. That's a very good group. But if you feel like you have to be guarded, which is what I was used to, that was the friend set, which is probably why it broke off as soon as troubles hit my life. And boop, it was like not touching her, the 10-foot pole. But it was like, that was very eye opening. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. These weren't the relationships I thought that I had. And they were just
Yeah.
superficial. And it was all about what they could get from me, not what they could give to me. And that is one thing about this group of ladies. They're always thinking about like, what can I give to you? And so we're just in this constant give and take and give and take. And it's very balanced.
I love it. It's great to have that kind of community. I'm curious if you could go back and give advice to your 2017 self or to women in general that are going through some things. I find it fascinating that when it was time for you to step up for yourself, you did all the research, you asked for advice, you prepared, you ran your conversation by people that you trusted. By all accounts, that should have been a successful conversation. There should have been a great job offer or at least some sort of negotiation or conversation to build whatever the next iteration of your role at this company was. And it did not go well at the time. Let's be clear.
Yeah,
It has gone very well now.
very.
But what advice would you give either yourself at that time or women that are finding their voice and want to speak up but are really concerned about what happens if this doesn't go well?
Yeah, I think it's all about having to check in with yourself. Even so, in the midst of all of that, my marriage was coming to an end. And I actually didn't seek advice on what specifically I should do in my particular marriage. And I also took the same approach with launching the company. And what this process is, it goes back to getting that quiet time. Research, I collected a lot of information, did a lot of research. But you need to go through that full process of evaluation of all the inputs and data that come to you and make your conclusion. If you are looking to others to make the decision for you, then you're just not ready. You're just not ready because it takes a level of confidence and assuredness that you absolutely need to have before you jump off that cliff. No one else but you is the one that's going down. So no one else can save you. So I'm really glad. And it was hard for some people to hear, hey, I'm going through with this divorce. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know. And I'm like, yeah, it's been a process for about a year now. It wasn't that I was like trying to be private. I needed to be okay with the decision because once I shared what I was doing, just like starting the company, people have lots of opinions. And I needed to be very confident in what my decision was and lock it in. Otherwise, I would have been waived. I would have been back and forth and questioning, and you'll never get off the ground on your decision making. So it's interesting when I look at my divorce process, how that almost kind of set me up for starting the company. Even my own father was like, everybody else was, you're a new single mom. You need to not be messing around with this. The right thing to do, get a job, get health insurance, and provide for those kids. You're not being a good mom, right? Now, my dad didn't put it that way. He was just very concerned, and he's my biggest supporter. But when I remember telling him, I said, Dad, I was like, no, I was like, I've thought this through. I'm willing to take the risks. I have managed what the risks will be. I have a cliff at which if I don't make it to the certain point, then I will go get the job. But I'm going to do absolutely everything I can to get to myself to that point to where I can continue on. And I think that's what you have to do. But that requires going back to, you got to have those quiet moments. Otherwise, your decision making is going to be the world. and it shouldn't be.
What I am noticing in the stories that you've shared today are the incremental steps. You already have a practice and a process and a belief, like a belief in a higher power and a choice to be quiet. From there, obviously, the inklings for changing your marriage, changing your job situation started to bubble up from that. And then you had the opportunity to practice, to build your strength in finding and aligning with your decisions to be able to speak up. I wanted to call that out because I think sometimes people think that confident people just wake up confident, that this is just how it is, or that people who have a voice have always had a voice. And it's absolutely a progression. It's absolutely practice, trial and error, recovering from falling on your face and getting up again. And I hear that in the stories that you shared.
Yeah, I did a lot of writing during those times as well, too. And one of the things that I wrote about was the difference between a soldier and a warrior. The soldier and the warrior are both on the battlefield and they're both fighting. A warrior is someone who has been through many battles, and a warrior is someone who knows when to fight certain battles, when to not fight certain battles. There's a level of wisdom that comes with it. And that's that confidence that people are seeing. It's because we've been through so much. There was a time that we were the soldier, and we have our battle scars. We have our wounds. We have a lot of stories to tell, some success, some failure. But the warrior aspect is that we keep persisting on because there is this greater calling that we are drawn to. But we become wiser and wiser as we keep getting closer and closer to it. So that's what I felt like my process I was going through was I'm relating more to a warrior than I am just a soldier on the field.
Love it. So, recipe time. Maybe not recipe time, but started your company, you're single mom in it, you have a lot of balls to juggle, plates to spin. What helps you stay on track?
Yeah. I'm going to put in my little note when people say I
Anything.
got balls, I go, no, I got two big boobs that are higher up to my head.
They're lifting you up.
They're lifting me. They're higher to the smart part. It doesn't take balls. It takes big boobs.
Amen to that, girl. I'm right there with you.
So repeat the question.
I am curious. I always want to know, what are people doing behind the scenes that keeps the engine running? Could be routines that you have, could be apps that you use, services that you like. What keeps the train on the track for you?
I am at least very scriptive in where I put my time. I did have to retract from a lot of volunteering. I used to do that all the time. So let me give my priorities of how I wake up in my day. It is my children, company, me, and then friends. From they are at the bottom of it, but it doesn't mean that they're getting the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
But that's really all I have time for. And so I don't overextend myself. I see a lot of people overextend themselves and then you're just failing at everything. So get disciplined on saying no to a lot of stuff and focus on those things that give back to you. I don't have like apps or anything to stay organized from that perspective. I think I'm just disciplined now on knowing what to focus on that truly moves the needle. And if you're in survival mode, just think about it. If you're in survival mode and you're on an island, there's just a few things. You need shelter, right? You need food, you need water. You will spend your entire time making sure that you just have those three things. You're not going to get distracted with, oh, let me build this neat little tool thing that I want to play with. Oh, let me go look at some flowers. So I'm very good at knowing what I need to focus on for the business to move it. And I've just been operating that way for 5 years. And then I also take that and translate it down to my employees, making sure as we grow as a company that is deliberate. That's new for this year, for 2023. I started 2022 with 10 employees. We ended 22 with 25 employees and we're hiring more. So now I have to, it's just not innate. Like I don't talk to everybody in this company anymore. This year, we are going to be deliberate in how we extract from my mind what those priorities are so that everybody else is able to operate in that manner. I think that's the best advice I could give is you have to be clear on what it is that you need to focus on and give yourself the freedom and the space to be able to achieve it.
I love it. This has been a masterclass for me today, Rebekah. Okay, final question so that you can get onto your very busy day. Imagine yourself in the middle of Times Square. You're safe. No cab is going to pick you off, but you're looking up at the brightest, sparkliest billboard, biggest, front and center, and on that, you can put a message to women in leadership. What would you put on that billboard?
The first thing that comes to my mind is love yourself so you can love others.
Oh,
I mean, that's
love
where it starts.
that.
That's
I'm
where it
so
starts.
moved by that. Thank you. Yes, I'm taking that in right now.
Yeah. I think we're all unique in how what our calling is. So the strongest like women that I've ever come across are some of the biggest lovers that there are. So love yourself and then that'll allow you to love others and just continue that on.
Thank you for that. It has been so wonderful having this conversation with you today. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for taking the time. Again, masterclass for me. There are some beautiful things that I have taken away today. I'm about to go out for a nice walk, even though it's raining,
Yeah.
just because of our conversation. So thank you for the inspiration.
Maybe I should start a women's retreat. I know how to
And it should meet on the 5th of May with margaritas.
exactly. That's how to kick it off. Perfect.
I'm in. Thank you again for your time. Oh, and where can people find Numeracle and where can people find you?
Numeracle.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I do post personal stuff on there too, along with just encouragements, things I see in the industry and how behavior should be and not be. And then also just follow us on all of the social media sites for information about the company.
Thank you again for today. And I wish you and Numeracle the very best.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for joining me this week. To view the complete show notes and all the links mentioned in today's episode, visit mygoodwoman.com. And before you go, make sure you follow or subscribe to the podcast so you can receive fresh episodes when they drop. And if you're enjoying My Good Woman, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Reviews are one of the major ways that Apple ranks their pods, so even though it takes only a few seconds, it really does make a difference and helps our show grow. This episode was produced by me and Julissa Ramirez. Thank you again for joining me, Dawn Andrews, in this episode of My Good Woman.